Hello, class, and welcome to Principles of Management Study Module number 3. Now, I just released this module this morning along with module number 4, and I think you're going to find that these two modules are very, very revealing and will take you further on another step in your learning experience. So I'm hopeful that you enjoy it very much. So let's just go back, excuse me, and examine our learning objectives. Right now, we will be looking at the evolution of management and leadership theories, and also the various roles and duties of management, and then some of the specific disciplines of management. In other words, if you want to be a good manager, well, these are the kind of things that you're going to need to do. So right now, even though we have a number of objectives for this course, we will still be concentrating on these three. So before we do that, let's just take a minute for a very quick review. One thing I wanted to mention is that our libraries at the Mount are a very, very good source of information for you. So please take advantage of what we have in our electronic data library in the archives at the Mount. You can pretty much almost find anything that you want. And then also the librarians are very helpful. So just a reminder. Second thing I wanted to mention is under the Files tabs in this course, you're going to find there'll be plenty of other essays and articles that are there that you are not required to look at, but I think you should consider to be resources, alternative resources that you can use to help you along with your studies. So let's just go real quickly into a brief review. First question is, why study management? Well, we already went over this, whether it's a hot dog stand or something as complicated and complex as a symphony orchestra. There are goals, there are objectives, there are responsibilities, and no matter what or how simple an operation appears to be, there'll still be elements of management that need to be pursued in order to be successful. I took a quick look at our Mount St. Mary's sailing ship, and again, I made reference to responsibilities. For example, the captain. My God, how many different ways to measure his performance? And then we have the shipboard doctor. We have the chaplain. We have the tenders that bring people back and forth. Let me move my picture. We have the pilot ships that safely guide the cruise ships into the harbor. We have the kitchen cooks that prepare very nice meals for guests. We also have our staff at the hotel, and we have our masseuses that are in our spa. We have our waiters. We have the engine room. We have the nail and hair spa. We have the front desk, and then we have our entertainers. All of these things are under the direction of a general manager on a cruise ship and the captain. So again, and then there's different managers within that hierarchy, such as housekeeping, the chefs, etc. So again, every single job has to have some method for measurement, and if it's being done right, a feedback system to the employees, and recognition, and even rewards. Same with the automobiles I talked about. The car is built years ago. We had a 30-day lead time because the products came from Japan. So that meant you had to have 30 days of inventory at least to meet the needs of the dealers in servicing their customers. You have a transportation system that brings the cars to the dealers. You have new car shows and advertising that promote the qualities of the new products. And then we have the parts for service, accessories, and service manuals, etc. So again, all of these are under the direction of specific managers. Now, nowadays, because our world is more of a global component in business. We have our export and import functions. And here's a good example of how critical the importance is of proper management. This 787 Boeing Dreamliner has parts, components from all over the world. That means in their procurement department and purchasing departments, managers have to be responsible for the purchase and the timely arrival of these parts so that assembly of this aircraft stays on schedule and doesn't go over budget. So, as we move into our lecture, let me quote one of my favorites, Peter Drucker. And Peter always was known for real profound statements. This one here is really important. That is, the product of work is not the responsibility of the worker, but of management. And it's management that decides how things are going to go and what the direction and feedback is to the employees that do the work. So basically, he's saying if there's a performance problem, don't blame the workers, blame the managers. Very witty guy. And again, we've heard this before in our studies in our first two modules. Management is the art of getting things done through other people. And as a leader, there's a couple of different approaches. One is hard power. That means a rather authoritative approach to making demands on employees. And then there's softer power, where the boss is mentoring the employees along, providing feedback, developing them, rewarding them, even creating opportunities for career growth. So let's take a look at leaders who make the best use of resources and opportunities. What do? Well, they always keep in mind the consumer viewpoint. What is it that customers want? What are we trying to provide, and how does it measure? What is the market like? How does our product compare to the competition? What kind of technical expertise do we really need in order to do the work that we do? And do we have a corporate discipline in which diversity is a priority? And do managers and leaders think of shareholders and stakeholders? And basically, I think this calls for a quick explanation if you don't know that already. But stakeholders, and if you just move to the second bullet, they may be affected directly or indirectly by the company's activities. I mean, that would include employees. If a company decides to do something really dumb, the employee might lose their job because of a loss of business. Shareholders, on the other hand, are people who have purchased stock in the company or invested in the company. Both of these have a vested interest in how the company performs. So this is important to know. So the question, can a stakeholder be a shareholder? Oh yeah, sure, of course. If they work for a company and they have an opportunity to buy stock, they are both. And that, of course, would give them more incentive to do a better job. So the heading here says leaders who make a difference by making use of diversity. Well, number one, some of the attributes of this type of a leader are that they commit to fairness. They understand the differences between people, not only in their employ, but also in the markets in which they serve. Inside their companies, they develop a diverse population with a diverse understanding of business influences. They listen effectively. They accept feedback. And they also understand that different frames of references can change with times. You know, what's important in the industry or in society last year might not be as important this year because it might have been replaced with something else. They realize the importance of skill development with their employees. and they also listen in an evaluative way, not just hearing the words themselves, but trying to understand what the real meaning is of the message. They share personal stories, and they're human. In other words, they don't consider themselves to be above others. Turns out that through market research, I think for this it was Gallup and also from McKinsey, diverse teams make better decisions up to 87% of the time. And that means a mix of gender and also demographic diversity. These provide a mirror to evaluate whether the decisions a corporation is making really speak to a population that's growing more and more mixed as the years go by. So, this is probably one of the most important slides I'm going to show you because it represents the foundation of leadership and management. So the first one, and you already had an assignment on vision and mission. The first is to have a vision and mission in the company. That basically reinforces what you do and where do you want to go. Then, once you have a mission and vision, you need to have some goals. Where are we going? Do we want to be, let's put it this way, at Honda, we always had a goal to gain market dominance over Toyota, which we very rarely did as a corporation. Then there was a SWOT, or it is a SWOT, measuring the strengths, the weaknesses of your company, the opportunities, and the threats. Threats being, let's say, external conditions or regulations. Suppose you're building cars with internal combustion engines, and suddenly there's a mandate by government that within 3 years you need to be 60% electric car. So these are the kind of things that you need to be aware of so that you can plan for. That means you can't assume anything. One of the most dangerous things you can do in business is to make assumptions because they may not be correct. So they need to be tested. So as these things build on one another, you'll be coming up with a strategy. Oh, let's say, for example, our goal, let's say I'm the president of McDonald's. Our goal in Orange County, California, is to be the largest distributor of hamburgers than all of the competition. That's the goal. Our strategy is to put in place 25 dealers or 25 brand new McDonald's stores that through their output should increase sales and move us towards our goal. Now, when you have a strategy, you have to think about scenarios. Excuse me, what can go wrong? What potential problems are there out there? You know, you could have suddenly a meat shortage that has been precipitated by the World Trade Organization, since some McDonald's may buy their meat from another country. So you have to think about possible scenarios that might occur. So now you have the strategy, and then you have a plan. And then if you're going to carry the plan out, if you decide to do so, what are the tactics? Who will be doing what when? You saw the example. Well, I will show you an example of the Empire State Building a little bit later. You talk about tactics and the need to meet deadlines and have different roles at different times be fulfilled successfully. There's a good example. So once you have these things, now in order to carry them out, do you have the budget to do so? Are there any company policies that might conflict with your undertaking? Let's say, for example, your company policy is, let's suppose we're doing McDonald's again, and you want to increase your sales of hamburgers in India. Well, one of the policies, we will not violate the religious beliefs of a population. In India, they don't eat meat or beef because they worship cows, respect cows. So therefore, you would have to have burgers that were made out of lamb. And again, that would probably fit under the umbrella of ethics and corporate social responsibility. And then, of course, legality. Whatever it is you're doing can't be illegal. And now we bring it to who's going to do the work. Now you have a staffing and an organization priority to have the leader, and then the next tier of management, and the next, and the next, all chosen in such a way that their skill sets are complementary to the overall strategy, tactics, and plan. Once the plan is in place and you're staffed, each of these managers should be following the PLOC functions of management: organizing work, planning it, leading your followers, and controlling through measurable objectives and routinely confirming performance. And this brings us to what's known as the Deming wheel, that was strongly advocated again by Peter Drucker, which is you make a plan, you do what the plan says, you check the results, you verify whether you're moving in the right direction or not, and based on what you learn, you act accordingly. And if things aren't working well, you have to change the plan. But the combination of these elements of the functions of management and these really provide managers and leaders the discipline they need to be able to conduct business in a responsible fashion, not only on a daily basis, monthly, annually, or long term. So on this particular illustration, you have really all of the components just about sequentially that should be put in place so that you do well as a manager. And Peter Drucker always brings us back to the five most important questions to him. What is our purpose? Who are our customers? This brings us into our mission and our vision. What do our customers value? What is our plan? And what are our results? Now, it's hard to believe that Drucker was a consultant for about 65 years, and that it seemed that every time he went into a firm, that people were unclear about these five things. I can tell you from firsthand experience that walking around the floor at American Honda, for many people, if I were to ask them, who are our customers, they would tell you the people that buy our cars, or our lawnmowers, or our outboards, or speedboats. Well, that is true to a certain extent, but our real customers, first line, are our dealers. And our job was to provide dealers with product, quality product at the right price. And then also, our job was to provide them with training and whatever else was necessary in order to have them flourish as business people and do a great job servicing our customers. So this was a point that needed to be reinforced because many of our employees felt that dealers were risky people and that they were doing a bad job and hurting our name. Well, in some cases, this is true, or this was true. But in the line of who our customers are, the dealers were first. So I want to stop for a minute and talk about the mission statement. And And I want to talk about Mr. Honda's personal ambition that he expressed in 1956. This was the first mission statement for Honda, and it says maintaining a global viewpoint. Let me move my picture back up here so you can read my lips. Maintaining a global viewpoint, we are dedicated to supplying products of the highest quality and efficiency, yet at a reasonable price for worldwide customer satisfaction. And again, it restates or states our purpose, who the company is, what the company does or is supposed to do, and it really kind of subtly takes into consideration stakeholders and shareholders. Here's a few examples. If you look at Honda's vision statement, always looking forward and having a bigger dream. I love this one. Lead the advancement of mobility and enable people everywhere in the world to improve their lives. You know, I was in charge of power equipment for about 5 years, and we made lawnmowers. And I had a meeting where I had to do a presentation to the president of Honda Worldwide, Mr. Kawamoto. And at the end of my presentation, you know, he was kind of complimentary, but he said to me, Jim-san, our role is to provide products that make people's lives easier, free up their time, and enrich their lives. And that was really the first time I ever heard anybody say that, you know, that we should be producing products that make people's lives more enjoyable and easier. And another time I was at a meeting and I was explaining to the president a recall that we had to come up with. And he was complaining about how many product problems we had and why we had to recall. And then he looked at me and he said, Jim-san, we must remember people's lives do not need to become more complicated because they have a Honda. So these are some good examples of how you see your mission and how you see your vision. And I wanted to share those with you. Now, Honda's vision statement has changed over the decades. The last one, which kind of coincides with the two little stories I just shared with you, is that Honda will strive to be a company that society wants to exist. Pretty powerful words. Now, let me switch gears to another career position I had. I was the chairman of the board for ICAR. I served on that board for 9 years as a representative of the automotive industry. Let's look at our mission first. The ICAR mission is to deliver increasingly accessible, on-demand, and relevant education, knowledge, services, and solution for the collision repair industry. And if you combine it with the vision, you have a pretty powerful duo. The ICAR vision is that every person in the collision industry has the information, the knowledge, and the skills required to perform complete, safe, and quality repairs for the ultimate benefit of the customer. And that's the vision of ICAR. And that's what we did. So that's just a couple more examples for you. It's important for you to remember that one is a vision, a grander vision, and the other one is a statement of what you do. Now, I'd like to stop for a minute and now switch to leaders. And we'll talk about, let's look at some examples here. We have some key leaders of history. Napoleon, Winston Churchill, Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln, Alexander the Great, and Mohandas Gandhi, or Mahatma Gandhi. Mohandas means great soul. So I want to link in two other words with this slide, and that is transactional or transformational in their leadership approach. And I'm not going to tell you what that is yet, but I just wanted to kind of pique your interest for a second. Leadership theories, again, we talk about management and leadership and their overlap. Stephen Covey, who is a great motivational speaker and business consultant and author, basically was quoted as saying that efficient management without effective leadership is, as one individual phrased it, like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. In other words, you need to have both. So now we talk about leadership. So can leadership be predicted? Who's going to grow up to be a great leader? And there are some quotes I put here by some very prominent leaders over the last 20 years. Actually, I got to change this, probably 40 years. This is Dwight Eisenhower. He was president of the United States in the 50s, and he was also the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces during World War II. And you can see the emphasis he places on getting along with people. And you're going to see through each of these leaders that I'm going to show you pictures of and share their quotes, that the importance of getting along with people was really at the top of their list. Gandhi, who basically broke India away from British rule, an advocate of nonviolent protest, same as Martin Luther King and Tolstoy, he basically shares that leadership at one time meant muscles, but today it means getting along with people. Jack Welch, General Electric CEO, very, very famous heavy hitter in the leadership sphere. What he thought was important, that good business leaders create a vision, share that vision, own the vision, and then work every single day, every minute to complete it. Lee Iacocca, fabulous automobile guy. He grew up in the ranks of Ford, but he switched over to Chrysler, who was bankrupt at the time when he took over, and turned it into a very, very profitable company. He would be what you would call a transformative or transformational leader. Once again, what's the main point? Leadership is nothing more than motivating other people. Harold Janine, he was the CEO for many, many years of ITT. And I forget for how many quarters, but for probably 30 quarters, he produced a profit over the previous year. And again, he says leadership is practiced not so much in words as in attitude and actions. In other words, lead by example. And Steve Jobs, his thoughts on leadership were, the people who are doing the work are the moving force behind the Macintosh. My job is to create space for them, to clear out the rest of the organization and keep it at bay, meaning to let them think in a creative manner. And finally, we have Ken Blanchard. He wrote the seminal book, The 1 Minute Manager, probably 25 years ago, and has produced many writings that have become very important to management education. And once again, he says, in the past, the leader was a boss. Today, leaders must be partners with their people. They no longer can solely lead or lead solely based on positional power. So you can see these wise men, if you will, They understood that if you're going to be leading people, you have to make sure that you understand the needs of the people and treat them properly. So, what is the best leadership model? Well, people have been thinking about this for 100 years. And also, what constitutes a good leader? So, let's take a look at the best leadership model, or actually leadership theories. Well, at one point, there was the great man theory. This theory said that leaders were born. That's it. That somehow in their makeup, they were born to do great things. Some people believed General Ulysses Grant was a born great man theory leader. Or others like Alexander the Great. Then there were trait theories that people can learn certain traits to be a great leader. There were behavioral theories, and they are similar to trait theories in that behavior can be learned to assist in becoming a great leader. There are contingency theories in that the best leaders can understand when there are problems and develop contingency plans to resolve them. And then the transactional leadership style is a leader that provides rewards or punishments for work completed. So again, you can see the span of these years from 1840 into the 70s. And then just looking at the leaders I showed you in the past 7 or 8 slides, you can see the focus now is on people and getting things done through people. So this great man theory, these two fellows here were in conflict over it. Thomas Carlyle, he was a sociologist and a philosopher, well-published scholar. He believed in the great man theory. Herbert Spencer was different. So, for example, Carlyle believed that the traits are inherited. Spencer believed that leaders are made and not born. They are the products of their environment. They're the products of experience. They're the products of education. So, totally different viewpoint on what makes a good leader. And by the way, as we talk about these leaders and managers, I want to call your attention to the Files tab under Canvas for this course. And as you look at some of them, you're going to see that you can have access to YouTube clips for all of these people. And also, I put together a summary for each one that's a written summary of the biographies of each of these. And then there's transactional leaderships. Max Webern was a tremendous scholar and sociologist and business advocate. Excuse me. And he believed in transactional leadership. So if you read the fine print here, the leader promotes compliance of his followers through both rewards and punishments. And these punishments were also part of the transactional theory. It all boils down to the carrot or the stick. In other words, you can lead people through incentivizing their behavior with a carrot, or you can beat them into submission and make them do what you want them to do by threats, coercion, and compelling them to do things. So, in the event, when you're looking at management and leadership challenges, here's a nice summary of this three-legged stool. For the people, what you see in this box are priorities. Also for the corporation, what you see for the planet are priorities. And for the business owners, and remember, the purpose of management, the key purpose, is to provide profit to the business owners, is to sustain economic performance. Without this, there can be no business. So now we come to the question of why would you want to follow somebody? Here's a leader. Hey, look, this is a great plan. Follow me. And the other is, I hear you, but why should I do that? I mean, what's in it for me? So what we have here are the traits of a successful leader. So what we have here, well, let me give an explanation of this illustration. First of all, we have some of the greatest leaders of all time: Gandhi, Lincoln, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who took us through the New Deal and more or less rebuilt America, and Martin Luther King, who basically was a key force in freeing Jim Crow, the African American population from Jim Crow, and really teaching a nation what it was to engage in nonviolent protest. A very good man. Same with Lincoln, Gandhi, and FDR. So, what would make anyone follow a leader? Well, first of all, they're perceived as appealing to a higher purpose. So that's the most important. But the second thing is they appeal to the followers' values. They have a persuasive vision of what might be, or who they are, or what they want to become as a company. They set great examples by walking the walk, talking the talk. They're self-sacrificing. They basically seem to work tirelessly and ethically towards the goals they've established. They have exemplary morals and authenticity, and they align with the visions of the followers. So there's been much research done on this, but pretty much when focus groups were conducted on employees and managers, supervisors, etc., these were the things that came out, stood out as some of the most important aspects of leadership. You're in a highly visible place as a leader, and the example you set is extremely important. And now the traits of the follower, well, people that tend to follow a leader, well, many of them have an affection for the leader. And I don't mean affection in the romantic sense, but affection in that they feel for the leader because of their courage, how hard they work, their vision, what they hold to be important. Consequently, these people demonstrate obedience. They try to emulate the boss. They accept what the leader is promoting. They identify not only with the leader, but with his vision, and they are emotionally involved. Now, you've seen emotions run very high during the last presidential race. And I'm sure the people that were following either Biden or Trump displayed all of these characteristics. So leaderships derive their power from a variety of different ways. So let's take, for example, in this chart. Why would people want to follow him, the leader? Well, number one, the leader could be charismatic. You just can't help but like the lady or the man, and you're attracted to them. or they could appear to be extremely legitimate, ethical, and of course, setting a good example. Or they could be coercive. This is another gambit that they can throw out there, and that is if you don't do what you're supposed to do, uh, you're not going to get a good bonus this year. Or they could provide rewards. Or they might be a technical expert. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs in the beginning were pretty tuned in on computer operations before they became executives and hired the best of the best. So, you take somebody like Jobs. What did he have? He had charisma, as a source of power. He could be rough on people. He could reward people. He was a technical expert. And I'm sure he created the image that Apple products were legitimate in improving society. So this is where leaderships derive their power, and often the reason why many will follow. If this person can use all these effectively, he's in a good spot. So leading and managing, again, in my book, they overlap because managers can be leaders even in their department, and leaders always have to manage. I would say a leader always has to be a manager, and a manager can sometimes be a leader. So if you want to see a good YouTube clip on management and leadership, John P. Cotter, who was a professor at Princeton, lectured at other universities, Harvard, Columbia, etc., and is a prolific author. He has a very interesting short video that I think would benefit you to look at. Cotter, he's quite a guy, and knows a tremendous amount about management and leadership, in particular, strategic planning and transformational change. So there are different schools of thought that evolved over the centuries that scholars have pigeonholed into four categories. And going from left to right, the classical scientific, modern scientific, classical administrative, and behavioral. So we're going to take a look at these. In these schools, there are some very prominent players, and I'm going to go over these and talk about each one so you get a good understanding. And again, you'll find under the Files tab, one of the entries has to do with a biography of each of these people. So, but before we do that, usually over time, when you really looked at all these different theories, they kind of broke into these different categories. One, autocratic managers that tell people what to do. Do this, and then when you're done, come on back and I'll tell you what next to do. And don't you worry if you do anything wrong, you're going to hear about it. Then there's the people oriented. You guys are a great staff. We have some challenges ahead of you. I know that you can do it. I'm here for you. I want to make sure you're properly trained to do this job, and we'll be monitoring your performance along the way to help you develop. And then there is the person that's task and people, and they've managed to blend giving very, very clear direction and supporting people. So I'm going to give you two words that we're going to talk about later. You might want to write these down. The first one is directive management. Do this, do that. Here's how you do it. Give me that. I'll show you. Or there's the, people that provide direction. And that's another story altogether. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we open this new hamburger facility by April 1. And Joe, you're going to be in charge of this. Harry, you're going to be in charge of that. And I think if you look at it this way, we'll probably keep everything in line and on target. So there's a softer approach, and there's a way to combine the two. So there's a difference between directive behavior and providing direction. And that's very important to remember. And if done skillfully, you can combine the two. So let's go to the first school of management, the classic scientific school. So let's talk about Henry Gantt. And again, his biography is there, but Henry, his claim to fame was the Gantt chart. And that was when there were a number of steps required in order to complete a task. They would follow a sequence, and they would be laid out on a chart such as this, and then the dates would be put in place. Probably invariably there will be a part which, if this doesn't happen, the whole plan won't be able to go forward. This is called the critical path. So if you were to look at the a very, very simple example, you want to put a poached egg on toast. So you're making the egg, but you have to, there's a number of things that have dependencies upon one another. And I'll leave it up to you to figure out which one would be the most critical. I think all of these depend on one another. And if you if you don't have the bread toasted, you cannot put the the egg on it. And if there's no water to make the tea, well, that's another story altogether. Well, so the point is, let's say, for example, if you were building, you bought a kit, a speedboat, you're going to build it in your house. Let's say you live on the East Coast and you have a basement or something like that. There will be a point when you have to remove the doors to take the boat outside, because when you put the rest of the equipment on the boat, if you were inside, you wouldn't be able to get it out the door. I know all this sounds a little bit crazy, but for a lot of jobs, there is a critical path. And if that critical path and the key component of that critical path does not work the way it was intended, it will be a showstopper. So Henry's claim to fame was building the Gantt chart. So can you imagine? And this is the Empire State Building, and you can look at a little bit about it on this YouTube clip. This is in 1930. This is New York. And here are some things about it. The construction took 1 year and 45 days, 7 million man hours, 4.5 stories per week, and $40 million under budget. Never before had anything been accomplished like this. And here are some other facts. 3,000 workers, 7 million hours, and again, under budget. So how'd they do that? Well, they had a material railway. They put a little train in place to move the objects of construction from one place to the other at the moment that they were required. So therefore, there had to be a number of critical paths there, because if any of them did not deliver when they were supposed to, all work would have to stop. Let me ask you a question. Would you say that silicon chips were part of a critical path to build automobiles? Well, when you consider the shortage today, that it might assume that role in various types of plants. Unbelievable feat. 73 elevators, 6,500 windows, 10 million bricks, 62,000 cubic yards of concrete. It was really an industrial marvel. And it grew at an alarming, never before seen rate of 4.5 stories per week. Oh my. So here's basically a summary of Gantt, that each stage of the work was scheduled, that each stage was monitored of completion, critical paths were managed effectively, and dependencies were clearly identified. So Henry Gantt really produced a product that's still used today. Okay, class. So we want to continue with another pioneer of management, and this was Frederick Taylor. And he wrote a book called The Principles of Scientific Management. And as I mentioned, he's also under the Files tab on this summary page I put together for the pioneers of management, their biographies, that is. His idea was to promote efficiency, to understand tasks, and to put in place precise, measurable procedures. So in his particular case, he's the kind of person that would be standing over a certain job. Let's say it would be the assembly of one part of a wristwatch or a computer, and timing how long it took, watching how the parts were picked up and moved from one point to another, the tools that were used, etc. Another person that was interested in this was Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. This is a married couple, and it was a combination of a industrial psychologist and an industrial engineer. So again, he was involved, the husband, in motion studies and time analysis, cycle time improvement, which is the amount of time it takes to do something from beginning to end, and then training and developing workers. Mrs. Gilbreth was responsible for trying to understand the human element, how people would become fatigued doing certain types of work. And she was concerned about ergonomics. In other words, if a person is going to move something, I mean, one of the things they looked at is bricklaying from one point to another, how it could be done in the most efficient manner without causing injury or wear and tear on the employee. Like this chair I have here is an ergonomic chair. It's supposed to make it easier for me to sit here and do work. and not hurt any of my joints due to poor posture. Also, she believed that cooperation between workers and management was extremely important. So she really was a soft power type of manager, and he really was more concerned with the nuts and bolts of the business. So here's the example of these bricklayers. You can see the clock they have here. And over here, you can see another type of analysis. I'm not sure what this fellow is doing, but whatever he's doing, they're measuring every single step and how much time it takes, trying to take into consideration the overall cycle time so that it can be done more efficiently. So Frederick Taylor would be an advocate of this approach, and Frank and Lillian Gilbreth the other. So again, he was a big proponent of that method. You know, Frederick Taylor, some of the principles that he taught really ended up in corporations like McDonald's, and how a hamburger is put together, how their assembly line works, how long each step takes, etc. And they became so famous, of course, that they're all over the world. And you may want to take a look at this YouTube clip regarding Taylor. Also, in the area of efficiency, we talk about warehousing. You know, you have certain parts that are slow movers or fast movers or medium movers. Those parts that need to be picked for shipment should be put in a place so that the worker doesn't have to reach high or low in order to pick it. It's called a strike zone, very similar to what you have in baseball. It would be between the knee and the chest, which would make it easier for this worker to go about his task without becoming overly tired or injured. In fact, in industrial warehousing, some of the bigger issues for people taking time off from work has to do with hand and arm injuries for employees reaching high, trying to pick up small boxes with their hands and bring it down. Also, in a warehouse, you have slow movers in one part of the warehouse, and then you have faster movers and even faster movers. So the loading dock is here. The fastest movers are here. So parts can be put away very, very quickly. Slow movers go to the back of the warehouse. And the mid-range movers go into the middle. So this helps in a number of ways. Number one, that when receiving inventory, it's easily put away, or when people that pick the parts for shipment don't have to walk too far for fast movers. I mean, it would be silly to have a fast mover over here and a slow mover over here. You'd have people running all around, banging into one another. And then, of course, we have the old dry cleaner. I mean, what could be more efficient? You know, what's the old saying? If you can't bring the mountain to Muhammad, bring Muhammad to the mountain. So these clothing, the clothing that's wrapped here, they just punch it into the computer and the location comes around. I think all of these really have benefited from people like the Gilbreths and also the Frederick Taylors. And even now, auto mechanics or technicians, as they're called today, when they're working on a car, they basically used to go to shop manuals, but now they can wear goggles or have some sort of a small computer available to illustrate repair procedures. So they don't have to walk back and forth to get the manual, page through it. Probably when they get to the page, somebody tore it out and kept it, etc. So that's it for one of our schools. Now we're going to move on to our classic administrative school. So in the classic administrative school, well, this picture kind of really says a lot. Rules and regulations. So now we were talking about the management side of the business that's beyond the nuts and bolts of it. So, for example, if you have a factory and the factory does all the work, well, there's a lot of administration that goes along with running that factory. So, this was a French scholar named Henry Fayol, and he was very interested in organizing and controlling different aspects of the business. He wrote a really a seminal book called Henry Fayol's Classic General and Industrial Management. He believed in division of work. One person shouldn't be doing everything. What you should have is, even in an assembly line, one person might be putting together the bolts that secure a dashboard, and another person might be putting the dashboard in and securing it. So this was a way to increase efficiency. He believed that authority needed to be respected and responsibility made to be very clear of who was responsible for what. He felt there needed to be discipline and unity of command. In other words, management supporting one another and following the same direction. So he was dealing with how management needed to behave and organize work. He believed that there should be a subordination of individual interests. In other words, that the business comes first. That people should do what they're supposed to do based upon their job description. He believed that people should be paid for the work that they do, that all direction should come from the top, centralized direction, not every department making their own rules. And scholar chain, in other words, a proper chain of command in the organization. He believed in order, equity, fairness, stability of personnel, initiative, and esprit de corps, French term for everybody having pride in what they're doing and working together. I could see this guy as a premier HR vice president in the way he looked at things. Now we move on to Max Weber, who I had mentioned earlier. He had written this book, which was another seminal piece, The Theory of Social and Economic Organization. He believed in any organization, there needed to be a very well-defined hierarchy. He believed also in division of labor. He believed in specialization. Jobs that required special talent, people should become experts at that type of work and be trained accordingly. He believed in rules and regulations. He also kind of was a cold fish. He believed in impersonal reporting relationships, not too much backslapping or kind of a buddy-buddy type of activity. He believed in competence, people, of course, being competent in what they're assigned to do. He also believed in record keeping. For example, it could have to do with the financial statement, or it might have to do with inventory control or production serial number recording in a mass produced environment. And then we have Mary Parker Follett, and basically she was the kind of person that cared so much about people. And she also has been known to quote numerous times, management is an art of getting things done through people. He believed in participative management, working in conjunction with employees, common goals, and in her opinion, the importance of the people versus the techniques. Very similar, but slightly different than Mrs. Gilbreth, who was interested in the people side of the business. And here we have another people person, Chester Bernard, who had penned the book, The Function of the Executive. And he believed that cliques in an organization were important. And he felt that these cliques, their actions would help themselves and other employees. So there's another school of thought. And I'd like you now to pause for a minute and ask yourself where some of these traits overlap between the different management schools. So we're going to talk about the behavioral management school right now. So one of the key players in the behavioral management school was Abraham Maslow. And he had written a book as part of his PhD project, his thesis, A Theory of Human Motivation. And this has really been a go-to theory over the years, that if you really want to ask yourself what makes people tick, especially in a work environment, there is, according to Maslow, a hierarchy. One is, if you don't have money, food, clothing, or shelter, you're not going to be motivated to end up as president of the United States. Or if you are in an unsafe environment, whether it's your physical environment or perhaps the threat of crime, you're not going to be motivated to be president of the United States. He believed that people needed social connections and to feel good about themselves, to have personal esteem. And when these things were all met, you would reach a point known as self-actualization, where at that point people are kind of like the military phrase, be the best you can be, where people are more prone to seek higher levels of performance and improve their lives. So again, we have the meta motivational needs, he called them, or the four driving needs. Someone similar to Maslow was Frederick Taylor. He had written a book called The Motivation to Work. This management consultant, psychologist, basically divided his theories into two categories: hygiene factors and motivating factors. These were the extrinsic and the intrinsic. So he called it his two-factor theory. So basically, and you're going to find some similarities here with Maslow, the more fundamental needs, the extrinsic hygiene factors, pay and benefits. You don't pay people, they're not going to be motivated. If you're treated poorly, well, how can you be motivated if you're not treated properly? If you have poor relationships with coworkers, you're not going to be doing well. And if you're not supervised well or you feel you have poor status, you're not going to perform well. And of course, job security is part of it. Now, if you turn these all around, that if you had great pay, company treated you well, harmonious relationship with coworkers and cliques, uh, and you were supervised properly and felt good about yourself, you weren't worried that your job is going to disappear, you would be more inclined to do better work. So if you look at the intrinsic factors in his two theory, well, one is motivation itself. If there are opportunities for personal and professional growth, if the work conditions were very, very good and your personal life was good, if there was an opportunity for achievement and recognition, you enjoyed the work itself, and you were given responsibility, it would be more inclined for you to be more motivated. So if you put these two side by side, you can look at the basic hygiene factors, kind of like the 4D factors from Maslow, which are here. And when these are in place, you would have general satisfaction and it would prevent dissatisfaction. You cut people's pay, they're not going to be too happy. If you take the motivational factors, these are the things, the feel good items that people need to feel good about themselves and their job opportunities. When these are in place, people are highly motivated. They have higher levels of satisfaction and stronger commitment. So I would say if we were to go back a few lectures, this group over here, if not done properly, would lead to disengagement. And this group would lead to engagement. So now here's another illustration I wanted to put in here. If you're a leader and you're trying to get people to follow you, why would they not follow you? Well, let's just talk about that. So again, resistance to follow. Why? Well, some people believe that they would experience a personal loss of control, a threat to their personal values, loss of pay, job security. So again, these kind of fit right in when diagnosing the teachings of Hershberger and Maslow. So lastly, we're going to talk about who I think was one of the greatest theoreticians of management, and his name was Douglas McGregor, and he created what he called the behavioral management theory. He spent a lot of work on organizational climate studies, and basically came up, and I'm sure you probably heard of this somewhere along the way, theory X or Y. And this had to do with the belief a manager might have of the propensity of employees to behave in a certain way. But that's it for now. We just completed module number 3. And again, I encourage you to make sure you keep your calendars, review the introductory video I produced about a week ago for modules 3 and 4, and make sure you have down pat all the things that you're going to be responsible for. Okay, so I appreciate you being in my class. I hope you're starting to see a lot of this come together, and I'll be looking forward to reviewing all of your work. Thank you for being in my class.